everyone, we're going to get started in just a moment.
D'un côté, si des pas mon Dieu. No level.
It's Kelpie vibes.
We'll get started here in just a minute.
D'un côté, si des pas mon Dieu. I know they sleep on the money. Who happy? Where make I no go find money? I know they send anybody. Me at the hustle, come check up. Make you hustle, my luck up. I know be your lord, I know be baller. Whoa, I'm a to balla fuck up. I go show you my color. She want to pay me a lot, balla. Me gonna more, yeah, I want balla. They matter plenty, I know me only satan. Oh no. Listen well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarita Wilkins, and I'm the Communications Strategist with the National Resource Center for Refugees, Immigrants, and Migrants, or NRCRIM. I'm joined here with my colleagues Riddhi and Ezgi from Ideaorg, and we're excited to talk to you about No Judgment, which is a vaccine confidence campaign that's created for and by immigrant and refugee youth. Before we get started, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to be sending both a copy of our slides as well as the recording to anyone who's signed up for this webinar, so don't worry about that. And we're also going to be dropping a lot of links in the chat, and we'll send all those to you by email afterwards as well. So don't worry about writing things down and copying and pasting, because you'll get everything in a nice little package. We're also going to have time for a Q&A at the end, and so you can drop your questions in the chat or by using the Q&A feature, or when we open up for questions, you can also raise your hand to ask your question verbally. So don't hesitate to add questions as you think of them, and we'll address them at the end. So our agenda today is going to look like this. I'm going to give you a quick overview of NRCRIM, and then I'll talk about some of the resources that we have that support vaccine confidence in immigrant and refugee communities more generally. And then I'll go into a little more detail about our resources for parents and how we have seen organizations around the country working with youth. Then Riddhi is going to show you how you can use open source tools to help de-escalate the often polarized conversations that are taking place around the COVID-19 vaccine among young people in RIM communities. So first, just a little bit about us. NRCRIM is funded by the CDC, and we're housed at the University of Minnesota. So we exist to support health departments and community organizations working with refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities that have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And we do this by strengthening partnerships between health departments and communities, and by supporting organizations that work directly with refugees and immigrants. So we support organizations by collecting and disseminating best practices, health communications and health education, and by offering online training such as this. We also offer technical assistance and a few other services. So we have a number of resources that support vaccine confidence in immigrant communities generally. First, we have a section of our website called Vaccine Central, and that has resources to support vaccine planning, rollout, knowledge, and confidence among refugees, immigrants, and migrants. So this includes checklists and guides, as well as promising practices from around the country that you can replicate in your communities. No Judgment is all about having compassionate, non-judgmental conversations with others. And even before we launched No Judgment, we had conversation guides geared towards adult audiences. And so these guides allow bilingual community leaders, staff at refugee resettlement agencies, or community-based organizations to answer questions about COVID-19 vaccines and participate in these kinds of conversations with others. And so we create these guides as new issues emerge and frame them around immigrant and refugee perspectives. We also have 3 campaigns. The first one you see here on the left is from the Get Vaccinated campaign. And this campaign is based on feedback that indicates that people from many different backgrounds connect with the theme of protecting their communities. In the middle is a sample from our Get the Facts campaign, which is based on CDC guidance, offering facts about vaccines in a simple and memorable way that counters common misconceptions. Now, these 2 campaigns are customizable with drag and drop templates. So if you want to remove our logo, change the URL, or use a more culturally affirming photo, we have templates for you to do just that. Now, on the right in that yellow box, that's a sample from the Vaccination Is campaign, which is created using a really community-led and hyper-local communication strategy that it's designed to honor the priorities and the values and the expertise of community leaders. And so Get Vaccinated and Get the Facts are effective if you need to do broadcast messaging that's universal at a large scale. But for a more targeted campaign, it's important to partner with the communities themselves to learn what will work best. And with these 3 campaigns, you can do that mass communication campaign for the broader community or develop targeted messaging for those that are hardest to reach. And we believe those are important for any vaccine campaign strategy. You'll learn more about Vaccination Is in just a moment when Murali talks about all of our different materials that we have. So we heard from immigrant and refugee youth that involving family in their decision-making was important, even among adults, like adult children. So we have a lot of resources here with parents as an audience. We have, for example, a fact sheet on vaccines for children, and this is translated into more than 40 languages, and it includes key messages that are relevant in many immigrant communities, like that vaccines are how children can stay safest, and that vaccinated children protect the entire community. We also heard from our partners that fertility is a top concern among parents in RIM communities for themselves as well as for their children. So we created a fact sheet that's translated. This is also in more than 40 languages, and it incorporates perspectives that are common in many immigrant communities. For example, that the vaccine will help you stay strong and healthy so that you can continue to provide for your family. It also notes that vaccinated parents protect their children, both by preventing the children from being infected with COVID-19, but also because, for example, antibodies can be passed on to babies through breast milk. So we state that vaccines are safe before you have children, while you're pregnant and breastfeeding, as well as for eligible children, all while showing imagery of multiple generations. So to continue with this theme of protecting the greater community, we have an animated short called Children Keep Our Community Strong. And this highlights the perspective of one immigrant mother as she explains why she chose to vaccinate her 2 children against COVID-19. So this video touches on themes like preserving their way of life, protecting future generations, and ensuring children can carry on family traditions. And this is available in 14 languages total. And we're working on a sequel that tells the story from the perspective of the father, and that we got the English version done this week, and we'll have the rest of the languages done by mid-May. So we've seen organizations across the country working successfully with youth and young adults. And we know that many refugees, immigrants, and migrants serve as a sort of bridge between their communities and the broader US community. And within this bridging role, youth often take on more essential caregiving responsibilities for their families, and this could be due to their ability to learn English or navigate the US context more quickly. Engaging young people as COVID-19 ambassadors can be a really effective way to reach more youth as well as their families. So this is an example we saw out of Atlanta, Georgia. The International Rescue Committee hired youth ambassadors who were formerly resettled refugees to help run vaccine and testing clinics and do work with health promotion efforts on social media, as well as during in-person events. So these youth ambassadors collectively speak more than 20 languages and help their communities overcome digital access barriers, literacy barriers, and they answer questions about vaccine eligibility, help folks schedule appointments, and arrange for transportation. The three people you see on this side are Attila, Christy, and Robel, and they actually helped us with the first stage of the No Judgment campaign, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. So youth groups are also really effective outreach partners. They can help distribute resources and empower youth in the community to be active participants in an emergency health response. So when COVID-19 started spreading rapidly in Kansas City, Advent Health Shawnee Mission relied on their refugee youth outreach group called New Change for Youth to engage with their community. So they got funding from the hospital system, activated the youth volunteers during their COVID-19 response, and they actually went door to door to deliver education and resources to the community. And these youth volunteers even, they were able to provide rare access to community elders that are some of the hardest to reach. And this partnership for them really went both ways. The health system got their information to the community, and then feedback from the youth about what they were hearing in these actions helped the health system improve their response. And lastly, I'll share, K12 schools serve as community resources to assist students and families who are refugees, immigrants, and migrants, and they're deeply rooted in their communities. They're still really relevant partners in the COVID-19 response. They're really uniquely positioned to bridge cultural and linguistic gaps for health departments, and families are already used to receiving information about a lot of different topics from their schools, so they can really help with outreach and education about COVID-19 and vaccines. So we've seen health departments partner with schools to provide services across the continuum of COVID-19 prevention and mitigation. They often have pop-up vaccine and testing sites. They have established case investigation and contact tracing practices, often have community-based interpreters, as well as liaisons who offer social support. And this is another example from Atlanta. The Refugee Women's Network and the International Rescue Committee partnered with their local school district and health department to offer COVID-19 vaccine clinics in the schools. And so they created this really fun event with a superhero theme, and they've administered hundreds of vaccines since they started doing this in January. We're actually hosting a webinar with them tomorrow just to explore more about this partnership. And so you see there's a link there, which we'll also email to you afterwards. Now, I know I just shared with you a lot. Everything that I just shared is really to help organizations and adults work with youth. And so looking at our health communications portfolio, we really didn't have anything that spoke to youth audiences specifically. So we partnered with Ideaorg to create something new. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ezgi and Riddhi, who will talk more about No Judgment.
Thanks so much, Sarita. Like Sarita said, we'll share a few more resources that Idea.org team has created in collaboration with NRCRIM and community partners. But before we get into that, to start us off, I'll share a bit about Idea.org and how we work. We are a nonprofit design studio, and our mission is to work alongside communities to design towards a more just and inclusive world. And our approach to do so is by using human-centered design, which simply means that we center people who will benefit from and use the solutions themselves as key decision makers and influencers. And we definitely recognize that community-driven work is likely very familiar to this group. Just like your work in human-centered and community-led design, community members are key to everything we do, not just at the start of the project for defining the problem or at the end for feedback, but they're the ultimate drivers and decision makers on what we create. And actually, we are honored to be joined by one of our co-designers, Murali, who will share her experiences later on in the webinar. So Murali's and many other co-designers' experiences takes many shapes and forms during a project. They range from surfacing the challenges and the needs they're facing to testing concepts in their communities, and also just co-creating that strategy for rollout and implementation. Because when it comes to sharing information, who is sharing the message is just as critical as the message itself. So in our work, we seek out and engage leaders who have already built that trust in their communities to serve as messengers. So here are some of the examples of our work. The focus of this webinar will be a tool called No Judgment, designed to reach young people in their communities. But we will also talk about Mothers for Mothers, that is designed to help you increase vaccine uptake of mothers from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities. And we will also touch upon Make Space, that might be used for building vaccine confidence a little bit more broadly. So without further ado, let's jump right into No Judgment Toolkit. So what is No Judgment? No Judgment is a toolkit that offers a variety of resources for community-based organizations and individuals to help open up conversations and create that empathy in the often very polarized conversation that take place around COVID-19 vaccine among youth. Excuse me. To do this, we provide trustworthy information on common vaccine concerns and some conversation strategies to engage young people. We wanted to make this a more human-to-human experience, not just like a website you go through. These tools are especially designed to take into account the unique needs and concerns of young people belonging to refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities in the US. And to make sure we are actually addressing those needs, we worked alongside youth who identify as from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities to create and test all the materials. So when we were talking to you, one thing that was very clear is that the more we try to change someone's mind, the more they become stuck in their thinking. So young people are more likely to shift attitudes about the vaccine when offered a more face-to-face human connection that involves an open environment for questions where they feel more validated and offered support. And how we heard this and kept bringing the youth perspectives into the tool is that we worked with a group of young people that we call the Youth Design Collective to co-design our refinements. And as I mentioned, we are joined by one of them today. So I want to invite Murali to introduce herself and share a bit about her experience. Murali.
Thank you, Eski. So hi, everyone. My name is Murali. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a Master of Public Health student at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And being part of the Youth Design Collective, or YDC, has been one of my favorite experiences thus far. And so as a public health student in the Community Health Promotion Program here, I found this collective to be a very creative and engaging approach to addressing health challenges. I also appreciated that IDEO.org and NRCRIM took the time to develop this collective because it shows that they are invested in truly understanding the communities they want to reach and serve and increase the effectiveness of the work. This can be reflected in the tools we have collectively developed as they are more feasible and sustainable and can be used beyond the COVID-19 vaccines as well. This collective really shows that like a multidisciplinary work is a stronger approach to addressing health challenges. And I'll hand it back to you, Eski.
Thanks so much, Murali. So in addition to working with you, we also gathered feedback from community-based organizations, CBOs for short, serving young people, including Asian media access, on how we might design these resources to be easily adoptable and adaptable by CBOs. In these feedback sessions, a few principles surfaced on what these tools needed to be. So first, culturally affirming, they need to be youth focused, they have to honor multiple perspectives and also overall be relatable. To give you a more sense on what we mean by culturally affirming, these tools are specific to the needs of refugee, immigrant, and migrant youth. For example, taking into account the immigration status, families being a part of the conversation, and the impact of their lived experiences of marginalization are all playing big factors in these tools to make them culturally affirming. This tool was also made by youth for youth. The tools were edited and created together with the Youth Design Collective, which Murali was a part of, as well as youth ambassadors from the International Rescue Committee. To honor multiple perspectives, our hope is to engage everyone with various vaccine perspectives in conversations, make them feel heard, to help shift mindsets. And a big part of that is to be relevant and relatable. The language here speaks to younger populations and normalize open conversations. The language is casual, inclusive, and inviting. So like I mentioned, in this tool, we have resources for youth and community-based organizations. And how we came about this is that when we were initially designing, we were going to make this tool entirely youth-facing, but we heard a key insight from testing these tools out. The social risk of posting something sensitive and original on social media is high for one individual. But if CBOs are taking the lead, then young people are much more likely to repost and engage. So it is hard to bring something up out of the blue, but it is much more likely and easier to start a conversation by reposting from a CBO's profile. So that is why we took some time to develop tools that are both CBO facing and youth facing. So here are the different resources for both. For CBOs, we built tools that help you broadcast your message to youth and to engage with young people in your communities. There are multiple tools to spark and facilitate this judgment-free conversation around the vaccine, and also tools to help you gather young people to have a judgment-free conversation. And for young people, we built tools to help them learn how to have this judgment-free conversation, gave possibilities to watch an example on our website, and also practice it themselves. So whether you are a young person finding your way to these tools through a community-based organization or on your own, there's a multitude of resources to clarify any doubts, practice having conversations, watch examples, and share them out. Here is how we imagine CBO experience for these tools look like. And just keep in mind that there's no required structure about these, but this is just a suggestion that we have. So there are three main components for CBOs. Spark stage is where you can use the quiz or the social media templates to engage young people on social media. And then in step 2, to host is when you could invite them to a virtual or in-person gathering. We have taken a lot of guesswork out of this hosting part because we recognize that that's very helpful, and we wanted to provide some sample agendas, which my colleagues will highlight very soon where you can find them. So you have a very good structure from the get-go. And then we have the practice part where we have a few tools to help young people and others to practice judgment-free conversations, which you can share in the gatherings or in social media. So this is just an overview on how CBOs can explore these tools. And here, this is for a young person. The journey can be very non-linear and flexible. They might learn about no judgment through a post on social media or a community-based organization, through a friend, or through a text-based platform like Discord. And once you're on this individual or youth facing page of our website, there are multiple resources that you can engage with depending on what you're looking for. So with that, I'll pass it to Murali and Ridi, who will speak on each of these tools that are available on our website.
Okay, so hi everyone once again. So all the tools that we've created are designed to engage with youth from RIM communities and welcoming open and honest conversations about the COVID-19 vaccine. through outlets and strategies that are popular among youth. So to kind of spark judgment-free conversations, we have 2 tools that are available. So one of our tools to get the conversation started is a BuzzFeed quiz. And these types of quizzes are quite popular among youth. And I can say because a lot of my friends have shared a lot of BuzzFeed quizzes with me. And this is an easy to share and is a creative way of engaging people to think about the pandemic and the vaccine. And it's not pushing forward a strong point of view or anything. It's just trying to gauge what people, feel about the pandemic, feel about the vaccine in a way that is not pushing people to think one way or another. And so it's meant to be really open and interactive. And it's an easy way to share the quiz with someone and be like, hey, like, what did you get? And then kind of start a conversation around like, that's interesting. Like, why do you think that? So it's really just a flexible way of having a conversation. And then next we have classically our social media posts, which are designed for CBOs to share with their youth communities and your communities in general. And it's for, your communities to share with their networks and to spark conversations. And as a fellow youth, once again, I can say that we highly engage on social media, especially Instagram. And Instagram especially has been a source of information for a lot of youth people, especially when it comes to what's happening around the world, what peers are saying about world topics, issues, and all of those kinds of topics. And so these posts are designed to be a trusted invitation to connect and start a conversation online. I personally can say from personal experience, we started an organization on campus called Mask Up UMN, which is a social media campaign about the pandemic. And the amount of engagement we got was incredibly high. We reached about 2,000 people on campus just alone. And we had so many people reposting our content, and I would repost the organization's content on my own personal Instagram, and people would interact and ask me questions and such. So it's a really effective way for people to share information and really interact and get reliable and credible information if it's posted by a trusted source, such as community-based organizations. And next, please. So the next 2 tools we have are to help practice judgment-free conversations. And so these tools are essentially hypothetical scenarios with concerns that peers might have and are designed to help a person validate and give information to help their peers and friends make a good decision for their own health. So the first one is the info bites, which are specific to refugee, immigrant, migrant communities and concerns or barriers they may face when accessing healthcare or making health decisions. As a person of color, I understand what it feels like to access the US healthcare system. It is quite daunting, and there is a lot of systemic discrimination in healthcare or logistical challenges if you're someone who's from the undocumented community. And so finding a way to receive the vaccine can be an important challenge to address. And so for each concern or topic, there are some pointers to guide the conversation in an open and welcoming way that is productive and helpful. So these pointers were written simply by youth and then verified by physicians for certain information you have that's probably more medically related. And so it's really designed to help people kind of navigate different scenarios of, I'm facing this problem. I might want to get the vaccine, but I really can because I don't trust the healthcare system. So how do you navigate that situation is where we have these info bites to come in. So another tool we have is text versation. And with texting being a common and sometimes more preferred form of communication these days, especially among the youth population, this tool is helpful for guiding online conversations specifically. So this is a tool that we particularly tested as part of the Youth Design Collective. And so it is an easy way to practice possible conversation responses when discussing the COVID-19 vaccine, especially with peers or friends who may be more aversive to it. So it's an easy way to kind of look through, you get kind of initial response, and then you try to play out different scenarios of, if I respond this way, what would be the possible response I get back? If I respond in a more open and non-judgmental way, what response would I get back possibly? And so you're kind of playing out these hypothetical scenarios to kind of understand how can you really attract the person you're having a conversation with to be more open and really express their concerns so you're able to give them the best feedback and help they need to make the best decision for their health. And so it's a real-time way to practice conversations essentially. So I will hand it over to Riddhi to give an overview of all the 4 tools we've discussed so far.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Murali. As Murali said, I'll just give you a quick overview of where a few of these tools that Murali has mentioned live on the No Judgment website. So if you navigate to the No Judgment website and click on social media posts, I'll take you through kind of just like where these posts live on the website. There's a variety of social media posts that you could use. And I'll just quickly scroll through them: unifying messages, stories and narratives, conversation starters, direct appeals, announcements and invites, and interactive polls. And so if you were to click on one of these, for example, if I chose the announcements and invites, it would take you to a page where you could then, as soon as this loads, you would be able to use the template, and you would just click that button, use template, to download your own version of the tools. And just for time's sake, I clicked on that button earlier today, and it would take you to a page that looks like this. So once you're here, it gives you really simple instructions on how to use these templates. On the second slide, 3 easy steps on how to use the templates related to this. So you would be able to click on, oops, I think I made a copy, my bad. You'd be able to click on whichever slide you'd want to use. So whether that's the blue, yellow, peach, or green color, you would then go directly to that slide. And here you'd be able to update any of the text here. You can type in, to our event, and type in any text that you'd want to put here. You can also adjust any of the event names, the date and time of the venue of your event. And then in order to export this as a PDF or a JPEG, all you'd need to do is go to File, go to Download, and then you can select from the different options of how you'd want to download this. And then you have an invite that's available to you within a matter of minutes. And so all of the invitation tools, the social media posts, are available in this Google Slides format, so that anyone with a browser and an internet connection is able to make beautiful social media posts without the help of a graphic designer. Another tool that Murali mentioned was the text versation. And this is something that we were really excited about because, as Murali said, this is a way to actually help young people practice the conversation, practice judgment-free conversations. And so this is an interactive tool that is available online through the website that you can just click through to start practicing having judgment-free conversations. So it's really simple. You just start clicking through. And it sort of sets up a scenario here where you're texting a friend and the topic of the vaccine comes up. And as you continue through, it offers you an option to choose a response. And so, for example, I might choose this first response: I hear you and you're right. The likelihood of you or me going to the hospital is sort of low. That sounded like a good response to me. And then I could see what my friend might say there. And what's great about this tool is that what it's really trying to do is show you like, hey, this was a really great response. And this kind of shows that you're on your path towards judgment-free, having those judgment-free conversations. But let's say, for example, that I was feeling sort of sour today. I might choose an example, or I might choose a response that's a little less compassionate. For example, where are you getting your news from? Always check your sources. I'll send you some reliable articles. And so if I had chosen that response, it kind of shows me what my friend might say had I given that response. And then the tool will tell you to, take a beat and think about how you're coming across in your conversations, and offers you some alternatives instead of what you might be choosing. So that's just an example, a few examples of this text versation. As you can see, this is just a few parts of the conversation, but it sort of takes you all the way through a conversation. And it's a great practice tool, whether you're sharing this with young people or, even doing this among your own staff. And I'll pass it back to Murali to take us through the rest of the tools that are available on the No Judgment website.
Okay, so we have two more resources for practicing judgment-free conversations. And so the first one is displayed here as videos, and these are my personal favorite to be a part of since my acting skills are kind of non-existent. But anyways, these videos reflect how in-person conversations may flow and provide an opportunity to show what a healthy conversation can look like while navigating the challenges of talking about the COVID-19 vaccine. So they kind of show how a person can actively listen to their friend, be open to understanding their friend, and also offer help and support to navigate their decisions. So we have two different types of videos. We had one video where it was just a peer-to-peer, so two friends talking with each other. And then we had another video where it was two friends and then a relative of another friend or a person where they may know more information than the friend. And so there's a few scenarios out there, and it really shows, if you're, in the moment and you're talking about something, the vaccine comes up, what are some ways to navigate talking about the vaccine in a way where you don't push off your friend, but really invite them to build that trust with you and be able to talk about it in an open space. And so the next one we have is tips for judgment-free conversations. And so these are skills that we see are effective in daily conversations and also in community outreach. And they allow people to feel heard and be comfortable to open up to share their perspectives and thoughts. So these tips will allow trust to be built enough to have difficult but helpful conversations that can help guide people to make the best decisions for their health. So these are all tools that we typically see in effective communication, really put in together in one set to really show, if you're having a conversation, try this. If you're having a conversation, try that, and really putting it into practice to see, okay, if you're using these skills, how is the conversation going? And also these are skills that are effective in community outreach, like I said before, just so you're connecting with your community members and making sure they're also feeling like their voices are being heard. Next, please. So lastly, we have two resources for hosting judgment-free conversations. And so these are mostly for community-based organizations, but also useful for youth organizations and individuals as well. So the first tool is a gathering planning one, and this is for community-based organizations or anyone really interested in wanting to host a conversation. So this is designed to help plan and execute one. So whether this happens at a place of worship or a community center or a place where the community often gathers, this guide is meant to bring your community together and hold a space to have conversations that are built on trust and a sense of belonging. And there are guides on how to create a planning team, figure out the logistics, and also build an agenda for what you want to talk about and carry out the conversation. And so this tool is really a holistic tool to kind of figure out all parts of, how you're going to do this process, how is it going to be done, who's going to be involved, how to really delegate and execute it. And so the last tool we have is called the troubleshooting guide. And this is meant for actually people who are hosting these conversations or anyone engaging conversations regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is for, whether these conversations are happening online or in person. This tool is really designed to provide tips on how to navigate difficult conversations on COVID-19, which as we all know, has become a very controversial and political topic in this country. So this is a resource to ensure, reassure, and protect the people who are doing this work. As someone who took part in the pandemic work these past few years, I personally can say that it is important for you to take care of yourself while doing this work. So this guide is here to help you personally navigate these challenges and also ensure that you're taking care of yourself while doing this work, because pandemic work is absolutely taxing. But that's all I have in terms of those tools, and I'll hand it back to Riddhi to give you one last demonstration.
Okay, thank you so much, Murali. And so as Murali said, I'll share a couple of the examples that she was just speaking about. For example, the tips for safe and judgment-free conversations. You'll find this on the individual page of the website. And so there's about 9 tips for having judgment-free conversations. And under each of them, it gives you kind of a brief description of what that tip is about. And then it gives you an example of, for example, you might hear under the tip, reflect back what you heard. You might hear, it just feels too risky to get the vaccine. I'd rather wait and see. And so in order to be reflecting back, you would say, perhaps, yeah, makes sense. So I'm hearing you don't think the risk of getting the vaccine is worth it right now, so you'd rather wait and see how it goes for others first. Obviously, that wouldn't be the end of the conversation, but it's just a tip in one tip in having those judgment-free conversations to ensure that whoever you're speaking with feels heard. And then another tool that Murali mentioned are the hosting tools for hosting a gathering. And so these all live on the organization page. And so we have 3 tools under hosting a gathering: the roles worksheet, your planning worksheet, and building your agenda. And so these are all similar to the templates that I had just shown you earlier, where when you click on these buttons, it guides you to click the button, use a template. And once you press that, you'll have your own personal copy of each of these tools. So I'll just quickly take us through 2 of these. This is the Choose Your Tools worksheet. And it's a really simple worksheet that kind of just gives you details on what are all the roles that you'll need in order to host a gathering, helps you just like, gives you some space to fill out who that might be from your organization, and then links you to all of the different tools that that person will need and how much time approximately they'd be spending on hosting that gathering or getting the gathering planned. I'll also walk us through the gathering building your agenda tool. So this first page just gives you kind of an overview of the key activities, and then each of the following pages gives you kind of the goal, the length that this might take, and the tone that you're trying to achieve during this section of the gathering. And it gives you really specific examples of what you could be doing during each of those sections of the gathering. So it gives you ideas of what kind of activities you might want to do and what you would need to set that up. So there's an introduction moment, kind of community agreements, which we're calling an invitation to a brave space. There's a small break that you're able to do, and we give you examples of what you could be doing during that break. For example, the quiz that Murali mentioned, the BuzzFeed quiz, is something that you could have young people do during the break. Then you'll have space to have judgment-free conversations and just practicing what it means to even have a judgment-free conversation. And then finally, the vaccine discussion, how you might introduce that topic and then explore the concerns that young people might have around that. And then finally, the aspirational closing, which just, wraps up the gathering in a way that feels really great and optimistic for young people in the session. And so with that, I will kind of close out what we had planned to share for the No Judgment tools. Again, if you have any questions about these tools, please do drop them in the chat. We have a Q&A session that will start in just a few minutes. Before we get to that, we just wanted to share very briefly a couple of the other tools that Ezgi had mentioned way at the beginning, the Vaccination Is campaign and the Mothers for Mothers tools. So just briefly again, the Vaccination Is campaign is a customizable, hyper-local communications campaign that you can use and customize for your community. And this is an overview of all the different types of materials that are available as part of that campaign. Each of these really supports different ways to build confidence and trust in the vaccine. And so all of the materials here have ready-made versions and languages on the NRCRIM website, as well as templates, which you can customize on the Makespace website. And so I believe there are links that are going to be dropped in the chat for all of these tools on the Vaccination Is and Makespace materials. And then the other tool that we wanted to share today briefly is the Mothers for Mothers toolkit, which is built for community-based organizations that work with mothers from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities. And this work was sparked by the insight that mothers often really have a strong influence on health decisions that affect her whole household. And so this was all around creating space for mothers to have the opportunity to, one, take a break from the labor of caregiving, but also just have an open space to talk about their concerns around the vaccine and get really reliable information from their peers. And so the Mothers for Mothers toolkit allows you to create a meetup that is quite similar to what I just described for the No Judgment, but is really designed to be sensitive to what mothers from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities might specifically want to hear and want to make space for. So there's a couple of different tools that we have. There are tools to plan your event, tools to promote your event, tools that help you prepare like how the activities for the meetup, and then finally the tools that help you like literally slides that you can present during the meetup. And so again, all of these tools are available in the chat, and we're happy to answer any questions. But please do drop any questions you have in the question and answer module. And with that, I'll pass it to Sarita.
Thanks so much, Rudy. We actually did get one question in the Q&A module while you were speaking, and I think you would be the best person to speak to it. The person was wondering, the person wanted a little more detail about how you develop the materials. So can you give a quick overview of like human-centered design process or the engagement process with the youth?
Absolutely, great question. Yeah, I think we probably zoomed past that just to get to showing what the materials we ended up creating were. But just as an overview of the human-centered design process, our process is really around, well, our goal with all of this work is to increase vaccine confidence among refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities. And so through the work for No Judgment specifically, we wanted to be reaching young people in these communities. And so the first step for us is to identify young people from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities who are excited about this topic of vaccine confidence and are really engaged in wanting to create materials to support their communities. We're also really focused on hearing from potentially unvaccinated youth from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities to really understand what the needs and concerns are. So essentially our first step is to hear from young people from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities and understand what the needs and concerns are. And so, like we mentioned a little bit earlier in this webinar, the core thing that we heard from young people was that it's really hard to have a conversation about the vaccine because it feels so polarized, and it can often escalate into conversations that feel really tough and challenging to have with your peers or with your family. And so that sort of led us to creating this core idea of judgment-free conversations. And so alongside young people who identify as from these communities, we developed tools that kind of like help to, one, just like spark that like tone of a judgment-free conversation. So all of the tools around the social media assets are designed to be very inclusive, kind of open and inviting. The quiz is not meant to push any sort of perspective. It's really just around like, oh, like kind of a fun activity. What's your post-pandemic personality? If we ever get past it, like that would be, it's kind of like open and inviting. And then there are a series of tools that then help you, once you are able to like spark that conversation, actually engage in judgment-free conversations. So the process of developing the tools was like hearing what young people wanted in terms of like how we might actually move towards vaccine confidence. And then we created a bunch of different ideas along with Murali and her peers and the youth ambassadors from IRC to really like understand, okay, these are some ideas of what could work in terms of sparking and engaging in judgment-free conversations. And we actually had Murali and many of her peers test out these tools. And so we have a little bit of an iterative process of, okay, here's an idea, let's test it, see how it works, and continue to refine it. And then that's how we landed on these tools. So I hope that answered the question. Please do follow up if I can be more specific about any of that.
What I'm hearing from you is like a very deep community engagement process with youth. And so just sort of with that in mind, I want to ask Murali, like what advice would you give to a community-based organization or a health department who wants to engage with young people in their community?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges of being a young person is there's a lot that we want for our future. And I think the biggest thing is that when it comes to engaging youth, we often, are doing work that like people see as higher level, but then we're not being paid as much or we're not being listened to what we want. And so I think the biggest thing is just really taking the time to sit down and actually listen, just like IDEO did when we were developing this process, and actually be like, okay, you're taking this feedback. Oh, it's not just feedback, but we're actually going to incorporate what you're saying into what we're designing and doing. And with any kind of, I feel like any kind of health outreach or any anything that really impacts the human rights realm or health equity or equity in general, it's really important to listen to what people are saying and actually translate that into action. Because oftentimes, people in power currently are like, oh yeah, like your generation, you will take care of these problems. And it's like, we can't wait until my generation takes power. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work that way, because by the time we get to that stage, the conditions we live in are just becoming worse. And so it's really important to take the time to act upon things right now, because the way I see it is that the future starts in the present. So I don't really see any point in waiting to take action. I'm like, first take the time, listen, get a conversation going, plan something, but plan it in a way you can actually translate it to action, and not be like, oh, I'll hand it off to this person or that person. And I really think it comes down to a lot of the political agendas around communities and anything else. It's just really being able to really like listen and be able to really take the time to put words into action is what I would say in terms of engaging youth is, seeing that we're coming with a lot of new energy, we're coming with a lot of new experiences, the world is rapidly changing. We know what's best among our peers and our friends because that's how we relate to each other. So being able to take our experiences and skills and actually putting it together to make something effective like IDEO did, I think is the best way to go about collaborating with youth.
I really love what you said about like the future is now, and like really just honoring the wisdom that young people already have, and not dismissing folks because of their age, not being able to wait. And also the connection that you just gave to like health equity and other social justice concepts more broadly, like taking sort of the concepts that are used to create no judgment and how can, and like applying it to other issues that might be going on. So with that in mind, what would you say about like what other solutions or what other things do you think that no judgment could be used for other than COVID-19 vaccines, whether that's other kinds of COVID-19 response or other kinds of health response generally? Like what possibilities do you see here?
Yeah, I personally think that these tools are designed for beyond the COVID-19 vaccine as well. And the way I see it is a lot of these tools are designed to just get, being a refugee, immigrant, or a migrant in the US is extremely difficult. We're coming from all sorts of different cultural backgrounds, and we're all in this big pot of the United States. And so I think these tools are really effective for also having conversations around like any other health choices or decisions that people want to make. And this can be as simple as going to the doctor for a primary care appointment, or just keeping up with other immunizations, or even just going to the doctor to take care of regular things. And as a person of color, like I mentioned this before I was presenting, it's really hard to like be able to go to the doctor and justify time going to the doctor when you're really busy, like doing school, classes, work, everything combined on top. And so just having these tools available of like, okay, I understand that, you don't want to see the doctor because you're being discriminated in the doctor's office and no one can understand your language or anything of that. And so being able to like understand what the person's saying, but also have resources on hand to be like, hey, like this is a clinic that I know of that serves your community. Why don't you try going there and see if that will be better for you because your community members are providing care there. So kind of something of that sort of, if those resources are available to reshare them, but just being able to have those conversations largely about health in general, because, and this also expands to like mental health, I would even say, because mental health is a really taboo topic in refugee, immigrant, migrant communities. Often it's taboo in general. And so like also being able to navigate conversations on mental health, I think these tools are very helpful of like, like, how are you doing today? But really, how are you doing today? And, being able to be like, yeah, like you're struggling, here are some therapy resources, or here are some people that you can reach out to within your community who would be happy to have a conversation with you, or like even like community-based like therapy, like group therapy, where like you don't really need a counselor, but you're just sitting here talking about your day, talking about the problems you're going through, and finding ways as a community to overcome them. So I think these tools can be adapted in numerous ways that fit the broad spectrum of health, in my opinion.
Yeah, it sounds like it is really broadly applicable. Like these whole compassionate conversations could be useful in so many areas of life. And I heard you name some barriers to accessing health equity, like time to go to a doctor's office or fear of discrimination and things like that. Could you or Rithi or Ezgi speak a little bit more about how the resources in No Judgment specifically center the experiences of refugees, immigrants, and migrants?
Yeah, I can jump in there, and then I'll pass it to Murali. I saw you unmuted. But I think one specific example I think that comes to mind is in the information bites. There are, specifically like there are questions that could be broadly applicable to young people, but then there are specific questions around immigration status. Like, here is my concern around immigration status, and then here's a helpful response of like how you might guide that conversation. For example, one thing we heard a lot from young people was that they really want their family to be part of this conversation. It's not a decision that they're just making on their own. And so ways that you might be able to engage your family, that's information that's captured in the info bites. And I think what we tried to do was one, just like, there are concerns that are really unique to people who might identify as from refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities. And so capturing all of that information in things like the info bites, in the textversation, in trying to think of other places that it would like show up like quite blatantly. Murali, Ezgi, any other places that you think like it's like pretty explicit that this is for refugee, immigrant, and migrant communities?
Yeah, I think basically echoing what you're saying, I think is really the major spots that I also saw were really relevant to refugee, immigrant, migrant communities, especially like the info bites, like you were saying, any of the tools that talk about like any concerns that we as youth are bringing to it. And obviously, I think it was Fatih who said like, we don't want this, like the website to be branded as like it's just for refugee, immigrant, migrants, because that also like others people out. So I think the way we have designed the content is we've taken our concerns and put them out there, but we didn't give it a label just to make sure that it is still welcome and opening for people to feel like I can also utilize these tools without feeling like I'm being othered, and that just because I'm a refugee, immigrant, or migrant, that I have to like adhere to using these tools, or have like is the experience of what I'm going through, if that makes any sense.
That does totally make sense. We have two questions that came from the audience, so I want to address those. We only have a couple minutes left. So Rithi, can you speak to Eric's question? He's asked if the content was available in different languages or will it be available? And the answer is no, it is only available in English. And it's based on feedback that we did get from the youth.
Yeah, I can fill in that feedback from the, so essentially what we heard from many of the young people that we were speaking with was that it actually felt really good to have the information in English, and that it wasn't really necessary to have this in other more specific languages. And that if anything, like, having the information available primarily in English was great. And then if they needed to do their own translations, then they'd probably be doing that kind of on their own, or like, translating it on their own. But it really was like, English felt like the primary language for most of the young people that we were speaking with. And we did speak with, I would say, a large range of folks from across the country, representing over 40 different ethnic backgrounds. So that's kind of where that decision came from.
And I'll just say quickly, NRCRIM has resources for adult audiences in 45 languages. And so for youth who want to have those conversations with their parents or their grandparents or elders, they have resources to assist them in doing that. We only have a minute left, and Victor asked a really, really good question that I wanted to answer. And he asked, like, what do you recommend you do when a conversation turns to a political topic? Like if a person is assuring like the government wants to control us. And I'm going to answer it quickly, and I'll invite my fellow panelists to do that. And the first thing we recommend is like absolutely just like affirming what they are saying. It's like, yeah, that's really scary. And that, we do have historical incidents of governments mistreating people like in the medical field. And it totally makes sense why that's a fear of yours. And I just want to like name that and hold that for you. And, these vaccines were not created by governments. They were created by scientists that like from all over the world that have been working together to create this vaccine. So that's actually one of our info bites that we have on the website, because that question does come up, and we have heard that question in immigrant communities. Does anyone else want to chime in? Anything, want to elaborate on anything I said?
I actually have that info bite pulled up if you want me to share my screen really quickly. I know we're kind of at time, but.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay, so Victor, I just wanted to show you that this is already on our website, on our societal concerns. And then here, if you hear someone say, I just don't trust the government, you can click on it, and then it's very much how Sarita addressed it. And this is kind of a way that you can follow. And then there's a lot more here. So yeah, I just wanted to point you to our toolkit as well.
Thanks so much, Ezgi. That is all. We're out of time. So I had some really good questions from people. Keep an eye out for an email from me. I'll send you links to all these resources so that you can use them with youth in your communities. And I thank you so much for spending the time.